David and Naomi moved into Lagos following the promotion of David as a medical consultant in one of the top health centers in the city. Lagos, a beautiful coastal city in the commercial nerve center of Nigeria and West Africa, attracting many international tourists who enthusiastically crave the rich cultural heritage the city offers. David's rapid rise through the medical ranks was no surprise, given his hard work and dedication to the medical profession. Against all odds, he had overcome some of the most difficult situations life would throw a poor orphan child from the rural town of Kuru, Plateau State, northern Nigeria. David and his beloved wife were brought together by pure fate. They absolutely loved and adored each other. David's meteoric rise within the medical profession ensured he commanded huge remunerations and allowances. He owned a palatial residence with a fleet of exotic cars to go with. Life was good for David and Naomi. However, something was missing. A child of their own. David and Naomi had been married for over 7 years without a child. The situation made Naomi very miserable and gloomy. She would cry herself to sleep most nights as she felt unfulfilled as a wife to David. David did his best to reassure Naomi. "My darling, you'd need to stop worrying over this," said David. "In God's time, everything will surely happen." "Why us?" said Naomi. "What did we do to deserve this?" "Don't speak like that, my love. Everything will surely be all right, I promise," David replied Naomi as he held her hands reassuringly. "We have been blessed so far. Always look to the brighter side of life," David added. "Come on, go make me your delicious dish of jollof rice," David said. At this, Naomi forced a smile as she made her way to prepare her husband's favorite meal. Few hours later, Naomi emerged from the kitchen with a plate of jollof rice to David's immense delight. That smells so good," David said to Naomi as she placed the dish before David. David met Joseph during their undergraduate years at medical school and struck a good relationship. Both of them now consultants in various medical fields. Joseph was mixed race, his dad a native of Enugu in southeastern Nigeria, and his mom an immigrant from Eastern Europe. Joseph was steeped in African tradition and culture and often read lots of literature and African history in his leisure. "Are you up for a drink later on?" asked Joseph as he tidied up his desk in readiness to close for the day. "Sure, why not? It's been a long day with lots of patients. A drink or two is surely a great idea." Joseph was well aware things were not so good at home with David and Naomi. "How is the missus?" asked Joseph. "She's all right at the moment," replied David. Joseph could see the pain in his friend's eyes and wanted to really be of help. Although Joseph's mom was an Eastern European, he was very grounded in Igbo culture. He grew up knowing the cultural importance society attached to having male heirs to continue a generational line and legacy. In generations past, men have been known to take more than one wife and had many children who helped in the huge subsistence family business. "I have an uncle who was childless for so long, and it made he and his wife very sad. But he was very brave enough to take a second wife, and now he has 2 lovely sons. What are you saying, Joseph? As David gave his friend a stern look. I'm not saying anything abominable, my friend, Joseph replied with a mischievous smile. Drink up and give me a lift home. My cousin Miriam is coming to drop off some delicious dish she helped me prepare, said Joseph. Mr. Counselor, when are you going to get married so that poor lady would have a rest from doing your cooking? David jokingly mocked his friend as they fastened their seatbelts in David's BMW convertible. The following Sunday, David ran into Miriam at the close of service and was pleasantly surprised to learn she had recently started to worship in their local church. Naomi had briefly stayed back to say hello to some friends inside the church after service, but could see David through the window chatting with Miriam. Naomi was a confident woman who carried herself with great poise. However, she was very much aware of the fact that she had grown bigger in size, and an uncomfortable feeling of insecurity swept through her as she saw how beautiful and elegant Miriam was. Some days later, Joseph invited David in to grab a cup of tea and a sandwich after David gave him a lift home. To David's utter amazement, Miriam was there to help her cousin. Miriam, David greeted with a glowing smile. David, nice to see you again, replied Miriam with her trademark charm. Joseph was secretly delighted his good friend got on well with his beloved cousin. If only. He quickly halted his train of thoughts as his imagination threatened to go into overdrive. The 3 of them chatted excitedly about the latest celebrity gossip in town as the evening wore on. The next day, David's phone rang as he was about to grab his car keys on his way out. Miriam, how are you doing? David asked over the phone. At the mention of Miriam, Naomi quickly dashed into the lounge with a visible frown on her face. No worries, I will do my best to pick up the items from the mall for you. Your cousin is a very lucky man to have you taking care of his lazy bones at his age. David chuckled to Miriam as he hung up the phone. Who is Miriam, and why does she have your number? Naomi asked David as she stepped into his path, preventing him from leaving the lounge. Hey, what's come over you? That was Joseph's cousin. She helps with his domestic upkeep. We are friends, naturally, David replied. At that, Miriam stepped away and dejectedly sat on the couch. David took a look at her, realizing his wife was getting fatter by the day. Miriam was yet to resume her journalist job since they moved to Lagos, and that had contributed to her weight gain. Out of frustration about her childlessness, she found herself indulging in more snacking than she needed. Yet, she helplessly let herself go. Later that night, as David lay fast asleep, Naomi stayed awake, wondering if her husband was secretly seeing Miriam. Stop it, she thought to herself. But unable to contain herself, she quietly picked David's phone and began scrolling through it. At the mall's cafe, David sat with Miriam for a cup of coffee. I didn't know you also planned to be here today, David said to Miriam. Well, it was a last-minute change of plans, Miriam replied, as they both sipped through their cup of coffee. It was obvious the 2 of them enjoyed each other's company, but David wasn't getting carried away. He was a married man and a Christian too. He had his reputation in the society to uphold. He was one of those who decried the current spate of moral decadence in the society. However, Miriam's easygoing charm and beauty wasn't entirely lost on him. The following weekend, David told Naomi it was time to enroll in a local gym to keep fit until she resumed her work. At that, Naomi flared up. "Are you calling me fat? David, are you calling me fat?" "Babe, calm down," David said as he tried to hold Naomi. "Is it because of that lady? Everyone cannot be as fit and gorgeous as she is," screamed Naomi. "What is actually wrong with you? What has Miriam got to do with this?" David angrily replied. Naomi stormed into the bedroom, slammed the door, and burst into tears as David sat on the sofa, angrily switching between TV channels. The situation got worse. David and Naomi fought over little things, and David chose to stay back late into the night to finish some of his office tasks. Naomi got increasingly frustrated with the direction of things. It wasn't long before the gossip mill made the rounds about David and Naomi. At social events, clusters of people could be seen whispering about them. It was all too much for Naomi. After the weekly fellowship meeting at the church, she poured her heart out to Mrs. Briggs, the head pastor's wife. "Commit everything into the hands of God and you will be all right," said Mrs. Briggs. The next morning, as David got ready for work, Naomi, who was convinced Miriam was the reason for David's recent late nights, confronted him, and a major altercation ensued. David angrily stormed out of the house on his way to work, and Naomi ran after him, demanding answers to her queries. David got to the clinic, relieved to be away from Naomi's constant nagging and penchant to pick a fight from nothing. His normal morning routines involved ward rounds to check up on patients before commencing his one-on-one private consultations. After he was done with the day's ward rounds, he settled into his seat and pressed the bell for the first one-on-one patient. "Good morning, Dr. David," a familiar voice greeted as he flipped through the patient's file. On looking up, he met the charming smile of Miriam. David felt his heart skip a beat as he found himself stuttering a response. "Miriam, what a surprise. Are you all right?" "Well, it's your duty to fix me," Miriam replied with a smile. David saw many more patients after Miriam, and as usual stayed back into the office to complete the clerical billings and paperwork. The consultation with Miriam, though professionally handled, still left him with a mild craving for her company. Miriam made him quite relaxed, and her sense of humor was a welcome distraction from Naomi's constant bickering and nagging. Without giving it a second thought, he picked his keys and headed for Miriam's apartment. Is this the end of David's marriage? Find out in the next episode. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for notification.